Returning home, 3 days early from a business trip, I had just put away my suitcase and was resting on the bed when I heard strangers entering the house with my husband. I hurriedly rolled under the bed to hide, only to hear my husband utter a single sentence to his mistress. That night, I grabbed my suitcase and fled. I dragged my heavy suitcase up the stairs, my body so exhausted I felt like I could collapse at any moment. A business trip expected to last a week in sunny, arid Colorado had wrapped up 3 days early. I had worked day and night, pushing the schedule to the point of exhaustion, just so I could come home and surprise my husband. The 3-story suburban house was dead silent in the late afternoon. The sweltering heat of the summer sun still lingered on the oak trees by the front gate. I quietly unlocked the front door with my key, not wanting to disturb my mother-in-law, who I assumed was in her room. My mother-in-law, Martha, was a woman whose meticulousness bordered on tyrannical. She had an unbreakable rule: a clean house makes for a cool mind and a good meal. But her version of clean was a barren, chilling emptiness. She forced me to hide all my personal belongings from my purse and coats to the smallest knickknacks inside closed cabinets, absolutely forbidding anything to be left out in the living room or on the dining table. I dragged my feet into our master bedroom and collapsed onto the plush bed without even changing my clothes. The familiar scent of the room made my eyelids heavy. I figured I would take a quick nap, then get up to clean and cook a lavish dinner for the family. But barely 10 minutes into my light sleep, the harsh, grating sound of the front iron gate opening jolted me awake. Martha's booming voice echoed up the stairs. "Oh my, you really have great taste, sweetie. Where did you get such a beautiful dress? It fits your figure perfectly, so much better than that tacky, country bumpkin wife of his." Following that was the flirtatious, crystal-clear laughter of a strange woman. "Oh, Mom, you flatter me. I was so worried about what would fit me now that I'm pregnant. Luckily, Thomas is so thoughtful. He buys me everything I could ever need." My heart plummeted. My sleepiness vanished completely, replaced by a vague, suffocating dread rising in my chest. I heard heavy footsteps coming up the stairs, not one person, but 3. The natural reflex of a daughter-in-law who was constantly scrutinized made me panic. My suitcase was still in the middle of the floor. My clothes were unchanged. If Martha walked in and saw this, it would undoubtedly trigger an endless tirade. In my frantic, unthinking state, I quickly rolled myself under the bed. Our bed was an old-school, heavy, solid wood frame. The clearance underneath was high, but Martha had outfitted it with a floor-length dust ruffle to keep the dust out, creating a pitch-black, enclosed space. The bedroom door swung open, casting a long strip of light from the hallway onto the hardwood floor. I held my breath, curled up in the darkness. The dust tickled my nose, making me want to sneeze, but I had to suppress it until my face turned red. 3 pairs of feet stepped into my narrow field of vision through a small slit in the bedskirt. Martha's familiar brown slippers, my husband Thomas's polished leather dress shoes, and a pair of unfamiliar, provocative, bright red stilettos. I heard Thomas laugh. That deep, warm voice that usually whispered words of love into my ear now sounded sickeningly sleazy. "See? I told you. When Claire is out of town, this house is ours. Make yourself comfortable." I had Mom change the bed sheets to brand new ones, so it doesn't even have her scent on it. The woman whined playfully and plopped down on the edge of the bed, right above my head. The mattress springs squeaked. She spoke, her tone a mix of pouting and smugness. "You say that, but what if she comes back unexpectedly? I don't want a reputation as a homewrecker. After all, I am carrying the sole male heir to your family line." Martha quickly chimed in, her voice dripping with a sugary sweetness entirely different from the harsh, biting tone she usually reserved for me. "Oh, hush now, Olivia, you worry too much. That Claire is on a business trip all the way in Colorado. It'll be ages before she's back. And even if she does come back, I'll just make up an excuse to make her sleep in the guest room or down by the kitchen. Honestly, a woman who's been married for 3 years and can't even pop out a single child is just a waste of food and space." Lying under the bed, hot tears streamed down my face, soaking into my sleeves. It turned out the spotless, organized house Martha forced me to maintain, that bizarre rule of hiding everything I owned, wasn't about a civilized lifestyle. It was about erasing my presence in my own home to pave the way for another woman to step in. I bit my lip hard, trying to stop the choked sobs from escaping my throat, feeling as if 1,000 needles were piercing my heart. But the most horrifying revelation was yet to come. I saw Thomas drop to one knee. His hand rested on the stomach of the woman named Olivia. His voice became so cold and ruthless that I couldn't believe my own ears. Just endure it a little longer, babe. Once Claire disappears according to plan, the $1.2 million eminent domain payout for her parents' land will belong to us. When that happens, I'll officially bring you home as my lawful wife. The floor beneath my back was freezing, but my soul was infinitely colder. That $1.2 million that was the compensation money for the ancestral farmland my parents had left me. The city's highway expansion project had just finalized the payout decision last week. I had naively shared the news with my husband, planning to use the money to renovate our house, set up a retirement fund for my mother-in-law, and save for our future children. Yet, in the eyes of the people I called my husband and my mother, I was nothing but an obstacle, a walking ATM that needed to be eliminated so they could seize my assets. The space under the bed felt as cramped and suffocating as a miniature coffin. The smell of musty dust mixed with the overwhelming scent of Olivia's cheap perfume seeped into my nose. I lay paralyzed, my limbs numb with terror and the agonizing pain radiating through every muscle fiber. Through the tiny gap in the bedskirt, I saw something roll across the hardwood floor, glinting in the light. It was a lipstick, my favorite burgundy lipstick, the one Thomas had gifted me for our wedding anniversary last year. Now, it lay carelessly at the feet of my husband's mistress, a bitter humiliation mocking the blind, devoted love I had given him. Olivia still sounded uneasy. Her voice echoed again, this time sounding more calculating and sharp than her earlier naive facade. But Thomas, your wife is smart, and she works in corporate finance. What if she refuses to sign over the land money? Or, what if she doesn't die? Are we going to have to pull another accident like you did with her parents? If the cops investigate, what will happen to me and the baby? Her question felt like a bucket of ice water hurled directly at my face, stopping my heart for a fraction of a second. Asterisk, my parents. Asterisk. The horrific car crash 3 years ago, the greatest tragedy of my life. A trauma I still cried over every single night. Thomas sneered. The laugh that rumbled from his chest sounded demonic, entirely unlike his usual scholarly, gentlemanly demeanor. He stood up and paced the room, the heavy thud of his shoes hitting the wood right next to my ear. You worry too much. Her old folks were driving that beat-up pickup truck. All I had to do was sneak under and snip the brake lines just a little bit. Going down those steep mountain roads, one hard brake, and they went straight off the cliff. The police investigators just ruled it a brake failure and driver error. That case has been closed for years. He paused, lowering his voice, brimming with arrogance. When it happened, Claire was so devastated she kept passing out. I was the only one by her side, comforting her, taking care of her. If she didn't trust me blindly, who would she trust? Now she looks at me like I'm her whole world. She does whatever I say. How could she ever suspect a thing? Martha, sitting in the armchair near the window, casually took a sip of water and smacked her lips. Let's not dwell on the past. As long as my grandson is born safely, and the money is in our bank account, that's all that matters. A lovesick, weak woman like Claire is easy to handle. Just play your part well, feed her whatever she wants to eat. We won't have any trouble sending her off peacefully. I've already consulted a psychic. This month is her unlucky month. Whatever we do will succeed. I bit down on the back of my hand, biting so hard I tasted the metallic tang of my own blood, just to keep from letting out a soul-tearing scream. My entire body shook violently, spasms of pure horror shooting down my spine. It turned out it wasn't a coincidence that I became an orphan. It wasn't a coincidence that Thomas appeared as my savior during the darkest days of my life. It was all a meticulously directed play, built upon the corpses of my parents, the man I called my husband, the man I shared a bed with. The man I trusted with my life was the cold-blooded murderer who had snatched away the people I loved most. My tears flowed backward, burning hot and bitter. I remembered my father's kind eyes, my mother's warm smile. I remembered how they had scraped and saved every penny to buy that land as a dowry for me. And now, that very land was the reason their daughter had fallen into a den of devils. The hatred that erupted within me was stronger than anything I had ever felt, entirely overshadowing my fear. I knew I couldn't afford to collapse right now. I couldn't die, and I absolutely could not let these monsters achieve their despicable goals. Thomas bent down and kissed Olivia's forehead, his voice sickeningly sweet. "Don't stress yourself out. It's bad for the baby. Let's go down to the kitchen. Mom made some herbal chicken soup for you. Eat up and get your strength back so you can take care of me tonight." Olivia giggled, the sound like shards of glass slicing through my eardrums. The three of them shuffled out of the room. Their footsteps faded down the stairs, leaving me isolated in the darkness under the bed, with a shattered heart and a soul that was rapidly hardening with a thirst for vengeance. The silence they left behind was eerie and terrifying. I remained completely still under the bed for a few more minutes, listening to the laughter drifting up from the kitchen, the clinking of dishes, and the savory smell of cooking food creeping into my nose. They were probably celebrating their impending, ruthless victory. Celebrating my misery and my predetermined death. I bit my lip until it bled again, suppressing the tremors racking my limbs. Slowly, I crawled out from the dusty space under the bed. My legs were numb from being cramped for so long. It took a few minutes of massaging before I could even stand steady, but my heart had grown completely ice-cold. I looked around the master bedroom, the place that used to be a sanctuary I had poured my soul into decorating. Now, it looked incredibly foreign and horrifying. I tiptoed to the small digital safe tucked away in the closet, where we kept our most important documents. Thankfully, Thomas was an arrogant, overconfident fool. He always thought I was a stupid, blindly trusting wife, so he had never bothered to change the passcode. It was still our wedding anniversary. With trembling fingers, I punched in the numbers. The soft times, beep-click times sounded like the unlocking of destiny. I hastily grabbed the property deed for the $1. 2 million land, all the gold and heirloom jewelry my mother had given me on my wedding day, and most importantly, a thick folder of high-interest loan documents belonging to Thomas that I had secretly discovered a few months prior. I shoved everything into the bottom of my suitcase, which I hadn't even unpacked yet. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I knew I couldn't stay in this house for another second, but I also couldn't alert the enemy just yet. I needed time. I needed a cold, calculating mind to plot my next moves, to inflict upon them all the agony that my parents and I had suffered. I dragged my suitcase and sneaked out the back door, taking the alleyway that few people used, avoiding any chance of bumping into the three people drinking and feasting in the front dining room. Once I reached the main road, I frantically hailed a taxi, telling the driver to take me to a hotel in a completely different district, as far away from that house as possible. Sitting in the car, watching the streetlights blur past the window, my tears finally broke free, uncontrollable. I missed my dad. I missed my mom. I missed the warm family dinners of the past, and I remembered the fake, gentle gaze of Thomas when we first fell in love. Now, all of it was just the pitch-black void of betrayal and lies. I pulled out my phone, blocked Thomas's number to avoid any immediate disturbances, and drafted a text message to the house landline, which Martha was always the one to answer. I took a deep breath, typing each word as calmly as I possibly could. Asterisk. Mom, I was on my way home when a massive crisis hit the company. My boss ordered me to fly to Seattle immediately to handle a PR disaster tonight. I probably won't be back for at least another week. Please take care of yourself and Thomas while I'm gone. Asterisk. After hitting send, I powered off my phone and leaned my head against the cold glass of the car window. It felt as if I had just lifted a 1,000-pound weight off my shoulders, only to take on a burden 1,000,000 times heavier. When I arrived at the hotel, I checked in and rushed straight into the bathroom, turning the shower on full blast to wash away the dust from under the bed and the profound disgust clinging to my mind. Looking in the mirror, I saw a stranger. A woman with dark, sunken eyes and a hollow face, but a gaze so sharp and cold it was terrifying. I recalled Thomas boasting about cutting my parents' brake lines. I remembered Martha's greedy face when mentioning the $1.2 million. Suddenly, a memory of my mother-in-law's bizarre daily habits flashed crystal clear in my mind. Martha was frugal to a pathological, sickening degree. She had a habit of hoarding leftovers in the fridge for weeks without ever sealing them properly. Raw and cooked food were mixed together in a chaotic mess. Even more horrifying, she would frequently unplug the refrigerator at night to save electricity, only plugging it back in the next morning. I had argued with her about it countless times, warning her that doing so breeds bacteria and spoils the food, but every time, she brushed me off. She would scold me, calling me a spoiled city girl making a fuss over nothing, claiming, "I've eaten like this my whole life, and I'm not dead. Do you know how high the electric bill gets? Do you not care about wasting your husband's money?" Back then, I had simply swallowed my frustration to keep the peace. Who would have thought that her stubborn ignorance would now become the deadliest weapon in my arsenal? I slumped onto the bathroom floor, the water crashing down around me, but my mind was sketching out a flawless script. No knives or guns required. No fingerprints left on a murder weapon. All it would take was a lavish feast, an unplugged refrigerator, and the bottomless greed of human nature. That night was the longest night of my life. The luxury hotel room had a warm, plush bed, but I felt as cold as if I were lying in a graveyard. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of my parents' crushed pickup truck and Thomas's sadistic smirk haunted me like ghosts demanding justice. I sat up, turned on the bedside lamp, and put a new burner SIM card into my phone to do some research. An automated text from the utility company reminding me of last month's electric bill popped up, making me pause. The bill was at a record low, barely half of previous months. I let out a dry, twisted smile. It was absolute proof that Martha had ramped up her extreme electricity saving campaign while I was away, unplugging everything, including the fridge, every single night. I remembered one time I had gone down to the kitchen for water in the middle of the night and found a puddle of water leaking from the fridge all over the floor. When I opened it, the cold air was entirely gone, replaced by the pungent stench of raw meat mixing with rotting leftovers. I opened the web browser and typed in keywords regarding food poisoning from improper storage. Countless results appeared, but an old FDA news bulletin caught my eye. Asterisk risk of fatal listeriosis from improperly refrigerated melons. Asterisk I devoured every line, my heart beating faster as I scrolled. The article explained that Times Listeria monocytogenes Times is an incredibly dangerous bacterium capable of surviving and multiplying even in low temperatures if the refrigeration isn't cold enough. Specifically, once a watermelon is cut and placed near raw food like meat or seafood without being tightly sealed, and the fridge is constantly losing temperature, it becomes the ultimate breeding ground for an explosive bacterial outbreak. When it infects the body, it doesn't cause immediate food poisoning. It has an incubation period before aggressively attacking the nervous system, causing sepsis, meningitis, and multi-organ failure. The mortality rate is exceedingly high if not treated immediately. I dropped the phone, burying my face in my hands. A violent shudder ran down my spine. Asterisk. This is it. Asterisk. This was the path the heavens had pointed out for me. I didn't have to get my hands dirty. I didn't have to lay a finger on them. Just a watermelon, some fresh raw seafood, and a mother-in-law's fatal cheapskate habit. I would turn that cozy kitchen into a laboratory of death, where their own gluttony and penny-pinching would execute these wicked people. I pictured Martha excitedly stuffing the unplugged fridge full of expensive food, then eagerly forcing her son and his mistress to eat every last bite so as not to waste a penny. I stood up and paced the room, my mind spinning with the intricate details of the impending performance. I needed to go back to the house. I had to play the role of the devoted, loving wife, and the filial daughter-in-law returning from a business trip, arms full of exotic delicacies to nourish the family. I would buy the things they craved the most, the expensive luxury items Martha would never dare spend her own money on, pushing their greed to its absolute peak. I looked at myself in the mirror and practiced a smile. The smile of the old Claire, naive, submissive, but no matter how hard I tried, my eyes couldn't hide the glacial coldness within them. I whispered to myself, Asterisk, Mom, Dad, I'm sorry I have to become this ruthless, but I have no other choice. The law requires evidence, and the evidence of the crash 3 years ago has been buried by time. I will use the law of karma to judge them. If they live honestly and know when to stop, they will survive. But if their greed blinds them, they will dig their own graves. Asterisk, I took a taxi back to the house right at noon the next day. The time when the sun was hottest was also when human vigilance was at its lowest. In my hands were numerous large shopping bags, packed with expensive, premium groceries I had just picked up from Whole Foods and a high-end seafood market. I bought a massive premium slab of raw king salmon, several pounds of live jumbo shrimp, fresh squid, and, most importantly, a gigantic, perfectly round watermelon. Its bright green rind looked like a promise of deadly sweetness. I walked into the house with a permanent smile plastered on my face, a smile I had practiced all night in front of the hotel mirror to ensure it looked as natural as possible. As soon as she saw me, Martha, who was watching TV in the living room, jumped in shock. She stammered, "Oh, didn't you say you were sent to Seattle? Why are you back so early?" I set the heavy bags down on the kitchen island, wiping the fake sweat from my forehead, my voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Yes, Mom." The partner company canceled the PR meeting at the very last minute, so I managed to catch a flight straight back. On the way, I stopped to buy some premium fresh seafood to treat the family. It's been a while since we had a really nice meal. Hearing the words premium fresh seafood and seeing the bulging grocery bags, Martha's eyes lit up. Her previous panic vanished, entirely replaced by glaring, naked greed. She rushed over, digging through the bags. "Oh my lord, look at the size of this salmon. These shrimp must have cost a fortune, huh? You really know how to waste money." But, well, since you already bought it, I'll put it away. Thomas walked down the stairs. Seeing me, his face slightly paled, but he quickly regained his fake, composed demeanor. He walked over and put his arm around my shoulders, playing the role of the caring husband. "Honey, why didn't you text me to pick you up from the airport? Carrying all this heavy stuff, you could have hurt yourself." I looked into his eyes, forcing down the vomit rising in my throat, and replied softly, "I wanted to surprise you. Oh, I bought a really amazing watermelon. Let me slice it up so we can all cool off." I took the massive watermelon into the kitchen, selected the sharpest knife, and slowly sliced it open. The crisp times, crack times of the rind splitting sounded delightful. I intentionally cut the melon into large chunks, purposely ignoring the plastic wrap, and arranged them openly on a large platter. I pulled open the refrigerator door. A foul, rotting stench hit my nose, forcing me to hold my breath. The chaotic fridge was stuffed with black plastic bags of ancient leftovers. The juices from raw meat and vegetables had leaked, creating a sticky, slimy mess on the shelves. I didn't clean it out like I usually would. Instead, I deliberately shoved the platter of completely uncovered watermelon onto the middle shelf, right next to a package of raw pork leaking bloody juice, and the fresh, uncleaned seafood I had just bought. I stuffed the shrimp and squid into the remaining gaps, engineering the perfect cross-contamination environment between the raw meat and the ready-to-eat fruit. I turned to Martha. "Mom, the fridge is too packed. I just shoved it in wherever it fit. Let's make a big seafood hot pot tonight. The watermelon is already sliced, so it can get nice and cold for you and Thomas to enjoy later." Martha looked at the fridge jammed with gourmet food and nodded enthusiastically. A huge grin plastered across her face. "Yes, yes, leave it there, I'll handle it. You had a long flight, go upstairs and get some rest." She looked at the bright red, juicy watermelon sitting next to the raw meat, but with her limited knowledge and decades of filthy habits, she didn't see a problem at all. All she saw was free, delicious luxury food. I washed my hands meticulously, taking one last look at my masterpiece before closing the fridge door. A cold chill ran down my spine. But I knew there was no turning back now. I walked upstairs. Thomas followed me into the bedroom, closing the door behind him. He asked, his voice probing, "You coming back so suddenly? Is your job in jeopardy?" I sat on the edge of the bed, pretending to be exhausted, rubbing my temples. "It's a bit of a mess, actually." but my boss gave me a few days off to decompress. Oh, by the way, I noticed Mom is being really extreme with saving electricity again. If she keeps unplugging the fridge like that, the food is going to spoil. Thomas waved his hand dismissively, laughing it off. Oh, whatever, you know how she is. She never listens. Just let her be. We make good money. If the fridge breaks, we'll buy a new one. Don't stress yourself out over it. He had no idea that his careless, apathetic attitude was actively endorsing his own death warrant. I lay down on the pillows, closing my eyes, but my ears remained hyper-alert to any movement downstairs, waiting for night to fall. Waiting for the moment, Martha would unplug the refrigerator, like a daily ritual. I lay there pretending to be in a deep sleep, but my mind was as taut as a bowstring. Around 3 p.m., my phone rang. It was an alarm I had preset, but I had changed the contact name to display as CEO. I shot up from the bed, answering the phone in a panicked voice, acting out the scene right in front of Thomas, who was playing a game on his phone nearby. Hello? Yes, sir. What? The client is threatening to terminate the contract? Oh my God. Yes. Yes, I understand. I'll head to the airport and fly back to Seattle immediately. Yes, sir, I am so sorry. I hung up, turning to Thomas with a look of absolute, terrified panic, my hands clumsily throwing clothes back into my suitcase. Thomas put his phone down, frowning. What happened? You literally just got here, and you have to leave again? I let out a long, heavy sigh, my voice full of resignation. It's a disaster. The contract I'm managing hit a massive snag. My boss said I have to fly back to Seattle right now to do damage control, or we could lose millions in lawsuits. I'll probably be gone for at least another 3 or 4 days to fix this. Hearing this, Thomas's eyes lit up. He tried to hide his smug smile, but the corners of his mouth twitched upward instinctively. He was undoubtedly thrilled that I was leaving again, giving him the perfect opportunity to bring his mistress back into the house and feast on the expensive groceries I had just stocked. He stood up, patting my shoulder with fake sympathy. Well, work comes first. You go ahead, I can handle things here. You work so hard, babe. I feel so bad for you. I dragged my suitcase downstairs. Martha was puttering around in the kitchen. Seeing me leaving with my luggage, she looked surprised. Where are you going now? I literally just got back. I repeated the boss's emergency script to her, and then emphasized the most critical sentence, the sentence that would trigger her bottomless greed. Mom, I am so sorry. I bought all that amazing food hoping we could have a nice family dinner, and now I have to leave. Please, make sure you and Thomas eat all the seafood and the watermelon I left in the fridge. That stuff was incredibly expensive, hundreds of dollars. Don't let it go to waste. And don't leave it in there too long or it'll spoil. It would be such a waste of money. Hearing the words expensive, hundreds of dollars, and waste of money, Martha nodded fervently, her eyes practically gleaming. Yes, yes, don't you worry. Just focus on your work. That food is too good to throw away. I'll cook it all up perfectly. I won't waste a single bite. She looked at me with a rare, sycophantic sweetness. Probably because she was already drooling over the impending free gourmet feast. I looked at her one last time. I looked at this greedy, wicked woman standing on the threshold of death's door without a clue. A strange mix of bitterness and eerie satisfaction rose in my chest. I walked out the front gate. Thomas walked me to the waiting Uber. He waved goodbye, his face showing the distinct relief of someone taking out the trash. As the car rolled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw him hurriedly close the gate and sprint back inside, undoubtedly to call his mistress, Olivia, over to join the party. I leaned back against the car seat, closed my eyes, and a single tear rolled down my cheek. It was done. The trap was set. The bait was laid. Now, all I had to do was wait for the greedy beasts to walk right into it. I whispered to myself, asterisk, eat up. Eat until you're full. This is the last feast I will ever buy for you. A feast paid for by the lives of my parents and my own blind love, asterisk. The car sped off into the late afternoon sun, leaving behind the house slowly sinking into the shadows, where the Grim Reaper was patiently waiting to drop his scythe. I sat in a coffee shop across the street from my old, cheap apartment complex, holding a glass of iced water that had long since melted, my eyes glued to my phone screen. Through the tiny hidden nanny cam I had covertly installed on top of the kitchen cabinets months ago, I watched every movement inside the house I had just left. It was late at night. A dead silence hung over the small kitchen. The dim, yellowish light illuminated the skinny, agile figure of my mother-in-law. Martha paced back and forth, fanning herself vigorously with a hand fan because of the summer heat, muttering calculations under her breath. I guessed she was obsessing over money again. Obsessing over how to save every last penny in that house. Exactly as I predicted, she approached the refrigerator, which was now packed with the expensive gifts I had left behind. She opened the door. The blast of cold air hit her face, and she took a deep, satisfied breath. She pulled out the platter of bright red watermelon, staring at it and smacking her lips. "My lord, where did that girl buy this? It's so red, it must be sweet as sugar. Leaving it plugged in all night wastes so much electricity. I have to unplug it. The weather is cooling down tonight anyway. The food won't go bad." Saying that, she bent down, her rough hands grabbing the thick power cord, and gave it a sharp, decisive yank. The low, humming motor of the refrigerator instantly died, leaving behind a terrifying silence like the stopping heartbeat of an animal taking its final breath. Martha shut the fridge door, looking as smug and satisfied as a general who had just won a major battle. She had no idea that her act of saving a few cents on electricity was the launch code for a deadly biological chain reaction. Inside that airtight, insulated box, the temperature slowly began to rise. The cold evaporated, replaced by damp, stifling humidity. The times Listeria times bacteria from the bloody, leaking raw pork and the uncleaned raw fish began to awaken. They multiplied at a horrifying, exponential rate. They crawled and seeped into the sweet, exposed red flesh of the watermelon, turning a refreshing dessert into sugar-coated bullets laced with deadly poison. The next morning, through my phone screen, I saw Martha wake up very early. She plugged the refrigerator back in, muttering praises to herself about how smart she was for saving her son money. She pulled out all the seafood and the watermelon, arranging them into a lavish spread on the dining table. Thomas stumbled down the stairs, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, sniffing the air. He looked at the table overflowing with shrimp and fish, and the platter of chilled watermelon, grinning from ear to ear. "Wow, Mom, you really went all out. My wife leaves and we eat better than a wedding banquet," Martha chuckled, placing the largest piece of cooked salmon onto her son's plate. "Eat up, son. Claire bought this with her own money. We might as well enjoy it. She said expensive food goes bad fast, so we need to eat it all to not waste it." I watched Thomas shove the salmon into his mouth, then immediately grab a massive slice of watermelon, sinking his teeth into it. The sweet red juice dripped down his chin. He ate greedily, ravenously, as if he wanted to swallow the entire world whole. Martha sat next to him and did the same, continuously mocking me for being stupid enough to buy expensive food and give it away for free to her. Watching that scene, a sharp, indescribable pain twisted my gut. I remembered the meager, modest meals from my childhood, where my parents would save the best pieces of meat for me, remembering their quiet, selfless sacrifices. Yet here, in this house, greed and selfishness had corroded their humanity, turning them into ruthless gluttons even at the dining table. The second day passed in tense anticipation. Through the camera, I saw Thomas still coming home from work on time, maintaining his habit of lounging on the sofa scrolling through his phone while waiting for dinner. However, his face today lacked the smug arrogance of yesterday. He grimaced, frequently rubbing his lower abdomen, his brows furrowed in deep discomfort. It was the first signal, gentle but definitive, a sign that the bacteria had begun their silent, aggressive invasion inside his body. That evening for dinner, Martha brought out the leftovers from the day before. True to her strict eat everything, waste nothing policy, she presented the watermelon platter again. The fruit had started to weep fluid and turn a dark, murky red, but she stubbornly cut away the soggy edges and served the rest. Thomas looked at the food, looking utterly exhausted. He sluggishly picked up his fork, ate a few bites, then dropped it. His voice was hoarse. "Mom, my stomach feels terrible. It's been cramping since this afternoon." Did the food go bad? Martha, taking a massive bite of rice, stopped and glared at him. Oh, stop it. You're overreacting. Claire bought premium stuff, and it was in the cold fridge. How could it go bad? You probably just had the AC blasting too high and caught a stomach bug. Martha was a deeply stubborn woman who trusted her patchwork, old wives' tale remedies far more than actual science. She stood up, rummaged through the medicine cabinet, and pulled out an almost empty bottle of Vicks Vapor Rub and some withered ginger root. She forced Thomas to lie on his stomach on the sofa, aggressively massaging the Vicks into his back while muttering, "Let me rub this out. Drink some hot ginger tea after and you'll be fine. What kind of grown man has a stomach as weak as a snail?" Stop complaining. Thomas lay still, groaning, enduring the aggressive massage. He trusted his mother absolutely, just as he had trusted that his plan to murder my parents was completely flawless. I watched the scene through the screen, a bitter taste rising in my mouth. My mother-in-law, the woman who always prided herself on knowing how to raise and care for a child perfectly, was currently using her own arrogant ignorance to accelerate her son's journey to the grave. She didn't realize that his stomach pain wasn't a stomach bug or a cold draft. It was severe bacterial toxins seeping into his bloodstream. Vigorously massaging him and giving him hot tea was only making the inflammation spread faster. I saw Thomas chug the ginger tea, his face flushed red from the heat, sweating profusely. He fell into a fitful, delirious sleep right there on the sofa. That night, I watched Martha unplug the refrigerator again before bed, even though there were still leftovers inside. She turned off the lights, and the house sank into darkness. I sat hugging my knees on my hotel bed, looking out at the city lights twinkling like distant stars. I wondered, in his feverish dreams, did Thomas see my parents? Did he feel an ounce of remorse for what he had done? Probably not. His greed had blinded him, erasing the line between good and evil. By the morning of the third day, Thomas's condition had deteriorated visibly. Through the camera, I saw he couldn't even get out of bed to go to work. He lay curled up in a fetal position, shivering violently despite the sweltering summer heat. His face was a sickly, ashen gray, completely devoid of blood. His lips were cracked and dry. He began violently vomiting, looking as if he were trying to expel his own internal organs. The horrific sound of his retching echoed through the tiny speaker of my phone. It sounded pathetic and miserable, but my heart had turned to stone. I felt nothing but the cold detachment of a judge waiting to deliver a sentence. Thomas struggled to lift his head, his voice a weak, raspy whisper. Mom, I feel terrible. Call me an Uber to the ER. I think something is really wrong. My head is splitting open." Martha ran into the room holding a bowl of hot chicken noodle soup. Seeing her son like this, a flash of worry crossed her face, but the cheapskate penny-pinching ingrained in her very DNA proved stronger than a mother's love. She set the bowl down, felt Thomas's forehead, and clicked her tongue. "You're burning up because of that stomach bug. Why go to the ER and waste all that money? You go in there, they'll make up a bunch of fake illnesses, run 1,000,000 expensive tests, and charge you thousands of dollars. Just stay home. I'll go buy some medicine, and you'll be fine." And with that, Martha hurried out to the local pharmacy. I knew exactly what she would do. She wouldn't buy antibiotics or ask a real doctor. She would buy heavy-duty anti-diarrhea medication, like Imodium, and basic Tylenol to lower the fever. A while later, she returned, holding a blister pack of strong anti-diarrheals. She propped Thomas up and forced the pills down his throat. "Here, take this. It'll stop you from going to the bathroom, and you'll get your strength back." I bought the strongest stuff. The ladies at the market swore by it. She had no idea that for a severe blood infection like Thomas's, taking anti-diarrhea medication was a fatal mistake. Instead of allowing the body to flush out the bacteria and toxins through the digestive tract, she had just trapped them inside. The bacteria would accumulate, multiply, and aggressively attack his internal organs. Thomas swallowed the pills and collapsed back onto the bed, his breathing heavy and ragged. Martha sat beside him, fanning him while muttering complaints. "What kind of man is this fragile? A little stomach ache, and you want to go to the hospital. Back in the day, your father was on his deathbed, and didn't dare go to a doctor. Just drank herbal tea and survived. You have it too easy. That's why you're so weak. Just rest, and go make money when you wake up. Her words were like invisible knives, slicing away the last fragile threads of Thomas's life. He squeezed his eyes shut, perhaps out of exhaustion, or perhaps out of helplessness against his mother's stubbornness. I looked at my watch. The decisive moment was approaching. When Time's Listeria Times enters the bloodstream, it causes devastatingly rapid complications. Martha's ignorant arrogance had accidentally stripped away her son's final chance at survival. I shut my laptop and began packing my bags. It was time for the dutiful, loving wife to return home to witness the final act and to play her final role in this family tragedy. I dragged my suitcase into the house, just as the late afternoon shadows grew long. The air inside the house was thick with the smell of Vicks VapoRub, vomit, and the distinct, sour scent of severe illness clinging to every corner. The moment I stepped through the door, I called out, feigning extreme panic and surprise. "Mom? Thomas? I'm home. Why is the house so dark?" There was no answer, only faint, weak groans echoing from the first-floor guest room, the room Martha usually slept in, which had now become a makeshift hospital bed for her son. I dropped my suitcase in the middle of the living room and sprinted into the bedroom. The scene before me, even though I was mentally prepared, was still chilling. Thomas lay on the bed, eyes squeezed shut, his skin the color of fireplace ash. His breathing was a harsh, rattling wheeze, like a broken bellows. Martha was slumped beside him, holding a hand fan, having dozed off from exhaustion. Hearing me, she jolted awake. Seeing me, she looked like a drowning woman finding a life preserver. She started bawling. "Oh my God, Claire, you're back." "It's terrible." Thomas caught a horrible stomach bug. He's been throwing up nonstop since yesterday. I gave him medicine, but he's not getting any better. I rushed to the bed and felt Thomas's forehead. He was burning up like a furnace. I turned to Martha, my voice laced with reproach, but maintaining a respectful tone. "Oh my God. Mom, he's burning up with a fever, and you thought it was just a stomach bug. Why didn't you call an ambulance immediately? What medicine did you give him?" Martha stammered, holding out the empty blister pack of Imodium. I saw he had diarrhea, so I bought this to stop it." I snatched the empty packet, pretending to examine it, then let out a long, dramatic sigh. Deep inside, I was thanking the heavens for her sheer stupidity. To dispel any future suspicions about the source of the illness, I swiftly executed the next step of my plan. I pulled out several bottles of fresh, cold-pressed watermelon juice I had just bought from an upscale organic juice bar on the way home. The juice was entirely different from the death melon sitting in the fridge. I poured it into 2 glasses. I handed one to Martha, then downed the entire other glass right in front of her. As I drank, I said casually, "I am so parched from the flight. Mom, have some watermelon juice to cool down. I bought this fresh on the way here. It's so sweet. By the way, did you and Thomas finish all the seafood and watermelon I left in the fridge? Was it good, Mom?" Martha took the glass, chugged the juice, and nodded fervently. Yes, we ate it all. It was delicious. The seafood was so fresh, and the melon was sweet as sugar. It must be because Thomas just has a weak stomach that he got sick. "Look at me. I ate it and I'm perfectly fine." Martha's statement was the ultimate alibi for me. She confirmed the food was delicious, she ate it, and she was fine. In reality, she had eaten much less of it. Her immune system was likely stronger, or the toxins simply hadn't hit her as hard yet. So, how could anyone ever accuse me of poisoning them? Furthermore, me chugging watermelon juice the second I got home solidified the narrative that the food I provided was perfectly safe. I looked at Thomas, who was slipping in and out of consciousness, and gently shook his shoulder. Thomas, wake up. I'm home." "Hang on, I'm calling an ambulance right now." Thomas cracked his eyes open. His gaze was cloudy, vacant, devoid of any life. He tried to move his lips to say something, but no sound came out. I gripped his freezing hand, massaging it with fake distress, while a cold, mocking laugh echoed in my mind. *Hey, honey, your wife is home. I'm here to walk you down your final stretch of road. Don't worry, I will take care of you exactly the way you took care of me after my parents' accident. Asterisk, I sat on the edge of the bed, holding Thomas's icy hand, but my mind was racing with cold, calculated steps to make this performance utterly flawless. I needed to ensure that no one, not even the most skeptical investigator, could ever question my innocence. I knew I couldn't just stand by as a healthy, unaffected bystander. I needed to be a victim too, a lucky survivor in this tragic family food poisoning incident. With that in mind, I let go of Thomas's hand, grabbed my stomach, and contorted my face in agonizing pain. I let out a sharp groan, just loud enough for Martha, who was nodding off in the chair, to hear. Ow. Oh my God. Why is my stomach suddenly cramping so badly, Mom? Ugh. It must be because I drank that cold watermelon juice on an empty stomach after traveling. My stomach is in knots. Martha jolted awake, looking at me with a mix of worry and a strange, twisted sense of relief. Deep down, seeing me suffer the same stomach pains as her son cemented her belief that this was just a standard stomach bug or a cold draft, as she insisted, and absolutely not the result of her unplugging the refrigerator to save pennies. She clicked her tongue, feigning concern, but unable to hide her condescension. See? I told you. The weather is awful right now. Everyone's getting sick. Go to the bathroom and see if you can throw it up. You'll feel better. That's what Thomas did earlier. There's some Pepto in the cabinet. Take some when you come out. I clutched my stomach and bolted for the bathroom, locking the door securely behind me. The cramped space and the harsh smell of bleach genuinely made me feel a bit nauseous. I stuck my fingers down my throat, forcing myself to gag violently, making sure the loud, graphic sounds of retching echoed out into the hallway for Martha to hear. Tears and snot ran down my face purely from the physical reflex of gagging. But looking into the bathroom mirror, my eyes remained completely lucid and terrifyingly cold. I flushed the toilet. The rushing water drowned out the noise, just as it washed away the very last drop of compassion I held for this family. I splashed freezing water onto my face, purposely not drying it to make myself look clammy and exhausted. I pulled a small compact from my pocket and dabbed pale, ashy powder on my lips and cheekbones. When I stumbled out of the bathroom, I looked exactly like someone surviving a near-death illness. I walked unsteadily, leaning against the wall, my breathing shallow. Seeing my state, Martha panicked a bit more. She rushed over, helping me sit down on a chair. Did you throw it all up? Oh, you poor thing. What is wrong with this house today? Both of you getting so sick. Just sit and rest. I'll go get you some warm water. I took the glass of water from her hands, intentionally letting my hands tremble, so water spilled over the edge. I'm so exhausted, Mom. It feels like my insides are twisting. I must have caught whatever Thomas has. Thank God you're healthy, Mom. If all three of us were down, I don't know what we'd do. My words acted as a potent tranquilizer to Martha's ego. She puffed out her chest, looking visibly proud. See? I told you, I ate the same food, and I'm fine. You young people have it too easy. Your stomachs are weak. Back in my day, we ate spoiled food and survived just fine. You two just lie down. I'll go make some plain rice porridge, drink some broth, and you'll be as good as new. Martha scurried off to the kitchen. The slap of her slippers echoed in the quiet house. I watched her hunched, hard-working back, a back that concealed an ignorance and stubbornness so profound it was lethal. I turned back to look at Thomas. He lay perfectly still, his breathing growing fainter by the minute. I knew the times Listeria times bacteria were ravaging his body with every tick of the clock. My fake illness wasn't just an alibi. It was designed to lull Martha into a false sense of security, convincing her that his condition wasn't life-threatening, thereby delaying calling an ambulance just a little bit longer. That tiny window of delay was all it took to cross the point of no return. I lay down on the bed next to my husband, pulling the blanket over both of us, playing the role of the devoted wife sharing his suffering. But internally, I was counting down his final breaths. Night fell, blanketing the house in a thick, suffocating darkness. True to her frugal nature, Martha only turned on a single, dim nightlight in the corner of the room. She absolutely refused to turn on the air conditioning, despite the sweltering heat, insisting that a small oscillating fan was enough and that AC would make the sickness worse. The air in the room was stifling, thick with the sour stench of sweat and heavy medicated oils. It was hard to breathe. I lay completely still, pretending to be in a deep sleep, but all my senses were dialed to maximum, tracking every sound from the man lying next to me. Thomas began to exhibit strange symptoms. At first, it was just low, agonizing groans. Then, mild convulsions started to shake the entire bed. Around midnight, the situation completely spiraled out of control. Thomas suddenly arched his back, his spine bowing unnaturally. His eyes rolled to the back of his head, exposing only the whites in the dim light. It was a horrific sight. Thick, white foam began to pour from his mouth. His arms and legs contorted sharply, as if invisible hands were snapping his bones. He made choked, gargling sounds deep in his throat, like a man being strangled, entirely unable to draw breath. I knew these were the clinical signs of the bacteria breaching the blood-brain barrier, triggering meningitis, severe seizures, and acute respiratory failure. The fatal moment had arrived. I couldn't delay any longer without making it look like an obvious, intentional murder. I bolted upright and screamed at the top of my lungs. The scream tore through the dead silence of the night. "Mom! Mom! What's happening to Thomas? Mom, help him!" Martha, who had been dozing in the armchair, jolted violently awake. She rushed to the bed. Seeing her son violently seizing and foaming at the mouth, all the color drained from her face. Her legs gave out, and she nearly collapsed. She stammered, her voice cracking with pure terror. "Thomas! Thomas, what's wrong? Oh my God, son, don't scare me. Why is this happening?" In her ignorant panic, she tried to shove her fingers into his mouth to keep him from biting his tongue, an outdated, dangerous folk remedy. I quickly intervened, slapping her hand away. "Don't do that, Mom. Call 911. We have to call 911 right now. He's not breathing." I grabbed my phone, pretending my hands were shaking uncontrollably, and dialed 911. My voice, however, remained clear and precise enough to provide the exact address to the dispatcher. "Hello? 911? Please send an ambulance immediately to address. My husband is seizing and foaming at the mouth. He can't breathe. Please hurry." I hung up and turned to look at Martha, who was wailing hysterically, slapping her son's face, trying to wake him up. I joined in the crying, tears streaming down my face. "Thomas, please don't leave me. Hold on. The ambulance is coming." "Mom, why is he this bad? I thought you said he just had a stomach bug this afternoon." My question pierced straight through Martha's soul. She looked bewildered, panicked, muttering like a woman who had lost her mind. I didn't know. I thought it was just a draft. Oh God, if anything happens to my boy, how will I live? The wailing siren of the ambulance wailed in the distance, growing louder, shattering the quiet suburban night. The red and blue flashing lights cut through the windows, dancing on the walls like ghosts waiting to collect a soul. Paramedics rushed into the house, quickly assessing him, intubating him, and loading him onto a stretcher. Martha and I scrambled into the back of the ambulance. Sitting in the speeding vehicle with the siren blaring, I looked at Thomas. He lay completely motionless, hooked up to an array of tubes and monitors. His face was a sickly, bruised purple, his chest rising and falling weakly, only thanks to the paramedic pumping the resuscitator bag. A chaotic mix of emotions surged in my chest. A tiny, fleeting sliver of pity for the man I had once loved with all my heart, the man who was once my entire world. But instantly, the image of my parents lying in a pool of blood in their crushed pickup truck violently shoved that pity aside. I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my palms. I reminded myself, this is the price he must pay. He chose this path 3 years ago when he cut those brake lines. The hospital at night was stark white and freezing cold. The sharp, pungent smell of antiseptic filled the air, giving the distinct sensation of standing on the exact borderline between life and death. Thomas was rushed straight into the emergency room. The heavy double doors swung shut, sealing us off from the frantic battle to save his life inside. Martha collapsed onto the waiting room chairs, burying her face in her hands, weeping loudly. Her cries echoed down the empty corridor, sounding incredibly tragic. I sat beside her, sniffling, occasionally wiping away tears, playing the role of the devoted, heartbroken wife to perfection. But my ears were tuned to maximum alert, waiting for the final verdict from the doctor. The verdict that would nail their guilt to the wall. Over an hour passed, heavy and agonizing. Finally, the ER doors opened. A middle-aged doctor stepped out, his forehead glistening with sweat, his expression extremely grim as he pulled down his surgical mask. Martha lunged at him like a hurricane, grabbing his sleeve, her voice cracking. "Doctor, my son. How is my son? You saved him, right?" The doctor looked at her, then at me, and slowly shook his head, his voice low and heavy with regret. "Please try to stay calm. The patient's condition is extremely critical. He is suffering from severe sepsis, which has progressed to meningitis and multi-organ failure. We are doing everything we can with dialysis and life support, but the prognosis is exceptionally poor." Hearing this, Martha's legs gave out entirely. She would have crashed to the floor if I hadn't caught her. The doctor's eyes grew sharp, looking directly at us. "I need you to be completely honest with me, so we know how to treat him. Did he eat anything unusual recently? Does he have any underlying conditions? Why on earth did you wait until he was in multi-organ failure to bring him to the ER?" Martha stammered, tears flooding her face. He didn't eat anything weird. Just normal food. And some seafood and watermelon his wife bought. He complained his stomach hurt for 2 days. I thought it was a stomach bug, so I gave him Imodium to stop the diarrhea." Hearing the word Imodium, the doctor's brow furrowed deeply, his voice rising in anger. "My God! He had a severe bacterial infection. The body needs to flush those toxins out, and you gave him industrial-strength anti-diarrhea meds. You basically locked the bacteria inside his body, allowing it to rapidly destroy his internal organs. Do you realize you killed your own son?" Martha froze, her eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated horror, her mouth hanging open, unable to utter a single sound. The doctor continued, "And how was that food stored? Was it hygienic?" I finally spoke up, my voice weak, grabbing my stomach as if I were in pain. "Doctor, the food I bought was extremely fresh. In times of Minusmin. But my mother-in-law has a habit of trying to save electricity. Every single night, she unplugs the refrigerator and plugs it back in the next morning. I've begged her to stop, but she won't listen. Could that have caused?" The doctor sighed heavily, shaking his head in utter disbelief. "That explains it. Listeria asterisk. This bacteria thrives in cool environments, but an unplugged, fluctuating refrigerator is a breeding ground. Storing raw meat and seafood right next to cut watermelon, and then unplugging the fridge overnight? You basically cultured a lethal bacterial bioweapon and marinated his food in it. Once he ate that, a miracle drug couldn't save him, let alone a delayed ER visit." The doctor's conclusion fell like a death sentence not just for Thomas, but for Martha's conscience. She stood paralyzed, her arms hanging limply at her sides, her wrinkled, aged face contorting in absolute horror. It turned out her pathological frugality, the blind ignorance she was so proud of, was the very scythe that cut down the life of her only son. I looked at her. I didn't feel a shred of joy or triumph. I only felt a bottomless, infinite emptiness. Evil had been punished by ignorance. A tragic, poetic, and utterly ruthless conclusion. The hospital corridor fell into a deathly silence after the doctor's words. The only sound was Martha's choked, agonizing sobs. She dropped to her knees on the cold tile floor, pounding her chest with her fists, wailing incoherently. "Oh my God! I killed my son. Thomas. Mom killed you. Why am I so stupid? Why did I try to save a few pennies?" Her heartbreaking cries made passing nurses look over in pity. She turned to look at me, her eyes pleading for help, but also filled with a belated, crushing regret. "Claire, I was wrong. I killed your husband. Save him, please." I sat down next to her, gently helping her up, but my hands were ice cold, offering no warmth. I looked deep into her bloodshot, swollen eyes, my voice remarkably calm. "Mom, crying won't do any good now. The doctors are doing everything they can. What's done is done. We just have to accept fate. Calm down. If you pass out, who will be here for Thomas? I spoke words of hollow comfort, but in my mind, I was delivering a completely different verdict. Asterisk. You cry for your son, but who cried for my parents? Who cried for the child I never got to have because you convinced Thomas to put crushed birth control pills in my drinks because a baby cost too much money? Does your pain right now even compare to the agony I endured for 3 years? Asterisk. Martha couldn't stop blaming herself. She slapped her own face violently. The mouth that had cursed me for being wasteful. The mouth that had urged her son to murder my parents for a payout. Asterisk. Smack. Smack. Asterisk. My mouth is a curse. I was greedy. I was cheap. I thought I was saving for him. I didn't know I was sending him to his grave. If only I had listened to Claire. If only I hadn't cared about the electric bill. She babbled like a lunatic. The remorse was eating her alive. But it was all too late. Time cannot run backward, and the bacteria ravaging Thomas's blood couldn't be erased by crocodile tears. I helped her onto a chair and handed her a bottle of water. She took a sip, then immediately vomited all over the floor. The massive psychological shock had broken her completely. I looked at her, a woman who spent her entire life calculating, pinching pennies, and deceiving others, now losing absolutely everything because of that very same calculation. Wasn't this instant karma? I sighed, looking up at the stark white ceiling, silently asking if my parents up in heaven were watching this. Would this revenge bring me peace? Or was it just piling tragedy upon tragedy? The ICU doors swung open. A nurse rushed out. Family of Thomas Vance? The patient has regained partial consciousness. He wants to see his family one last time. Prepare yourselves. He likely won't make it through the night. Hearing this, Martha stumbled up, trying to rush into the room like a madwoman. I followed her, my steps slow, my mind as still as a placid lake. It was time to face the enemy one last time. To tell him the truth, to ensure he carried absolute horror with him to his grave. I adjusted my clothes, wiped the fake tears from my cheeks, and prepared for the final curtain call of my life's greatest performance. The heavy doors of the intensive care unit opened. A blast of freezing, sterile air hit my face, making me shiver. The room was terrifyingly quiet, save for the rhythmic, mechanical times, beep, beep, beep times of the life support monitors, cold and indifferent, like a countdown to the end. I donned the oversized blue protective gown and strapped a mask over my face, leaving only my red, fake crying eyes visible. The doctor warned me I only had 5 minutes. The patient was extremely weak, his vital signs plummeting uncontrollably. I nodded, my feet heavy as I approached the bed in the corner, where the man I had shared my life with lay gasping for his final breaths. Thomas lay there, his body hooked up to a maze of tubes and wires. A massive oxygen mask covered his face, which was distorted, swollen, and bruised purple. His eyes were squeezed shut, his chest rising and falling weakly. He looked pathetic and utterly alone. I stood silently by the bed, looking at him for a long time. My emotions were so calloused that I couldn't find a single ounce of pity inside myself. I remembered the image of him getting down on one knee to propose to me 3 years ago, his radiant smile promising to protect me forever. All those beautiful images were shattered, replaced by the naked truth of a cold-blooded murderer who took my parents' lives for money. I leaned down closely, putting my mouth right next to his ear, the only part of him not covered by medical equipment. I whispered softly. My voice was sweet, but laced with absolute venomous death. Thomas, honey. It's Claire. Your wife is here. Can you hear me? His eyes twitched, then slowly forced open. Through a tiny, cloudy slit, I saw pure panic. He looked at me, his gaze pleading for help. Perhaps he was hoping for a miracle, hoping I could save him from this hell. But he had no idea that I was the one who pushed him into it, with a meticulously calculated, terrifyingly precise plan. I reached out and gently stroked his clammy, sweat-drenched forehead, whispering every word with razor-sharp clarity. Was the watermelon good, honey? Was the raw salmon fresh? I told Mom not to unplug the fridge, but she never listens. Now all the food is infected. Thomas's pupils dilated. His gaze shifted from pleading to absolute, unadulterated terror. He tried to move, tried to thrash, but his body was completely paralyzed. Only his fingers twitched violently against the white hospital sheets. I continued to whisper, my voice as cold as glacial ice, but, to be honest, I knew perfectly well Mom was going to unplug it. I purposely bought all that raw meat and seafood. I purposely left it uncovered right next to the sliced watermelon, just for you. Thomas stared at me, his eyes bulging. His breathing inside the oxygen mask became rapid, erratic, desperate. He wanted to scream. He wanted to expose me. But he couldn't make a single sound. He could only lie there, helplessly listening to my confession, words that pierced his failing heart like 1,000 burning needles. I stood up straight, looking down into his rapidly fading eyes, and gave a faint smile beneath my mask. You planned to kill me to steal my $1. $2 million payout, so you could marry your mistress and raise your bastard kid, didn't you? You thought I didn't know you cut my parents' brake lines 3 years ago. I was under the bed that night, Thomas. I heard everything. A blood debt must be paid in blood. You can go in peace now. When you get down to hell, make sure you apologize to my parents. And as for your mother, don't worry. She will spend the rest of her miserable life drowning in the guilt that she is the one who murdered you. After that final, fatal whisper, the heart monitor beside the bed suddenly shrieked. A harsh, frantic, deafening alarm. Thomas's eyes bulged to their absolute limit. His body violently seized one last time, then went completely rigid. His eyes remained wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling, filled with an unfathomable rage and ultimate terror that would never be released. The jagged green line on the digital monitor flattened into a straight, endless line, signaling the end of a life built entirely on greed and sin. Doctors and nurses rushed into the room. They pushed me out into the hallway to initiate final resuscitation protocols, even though everyone in the room knew it was completely hopeless. I stepped out of the ICU, stripping off the restrictive protective gown, feeling as if I was shedding a filthy, toxic skin. The hospital corridor was still freezing and empty. Martha was huddled on a waiting chair, clutching a rosary, her lips moving in frantic prayer. Seeing me walk out, she looked up with swollen eyes, a fragile glimmer of hope in her gaze. I took a deep breath, forcing the most agonized tears I could muster. I walked over to her, collapsed to my knees, and sobbed hysterically. Mom! Thomas! He left us. He's gone, Mom. Martha froze for a second, as if her brain couldn't process the meaning of those words. Then, she let out a soul-tearing, blood-curdling scream. She threw herself onto the floor, thrashing wildly. No, impossible. My son, why did you leave me? Oh God, why are you so cruel to me? She lunged toward the ICU doors, pounding on the glass, screaming her son's name in utter despair. Nurses had to run out and physically restrain her, injecting her with a heavy sedative to stop her from tearing the hospital apart. I stood back, watching the chaotic scene, watching the woman who had just lost her son writhe in agony. My heart was as still as a lake after a hurricane. Thomas's death was fast and brutal, exactly according to my script. He died because of his own greed. He died because of the ignorance of the mother he always obeyed. And he died because of the vengeance of the wife he plotted to murder. I helped the sedated, limp Martha back to her chair, rubbing her chest to help her breathe. While doing so, I maintained the perfect facade of the grieving, dutiful daughter-in-law. But deep in my mind, I was thinking of my parents. Mom, Dad, you must be watching from above. The monster who destroyed our family has paid the price. I didn't need a gun or a knife. I didn't need the police. The law of karma handled it with absolute justice. The doctor walked out, officially pronouncing the time of death, and asked the family to handle the paperwork to transfer the body to the morgue. I stepped up and handled everything, from signing the forms and hiring the funeral home to comforting the catatonic mother-in-law. I executed every task with a smooth, eerie calmness that made everyone around me praise me as an incredibly strong, capable, and devoted wife. Only I knew that my calmness came from the fact that my heart had died a long time ago. It died the night I lay under that bed and listened to my husband plot my murder. The hearse rolled out of the hospital gates, carrying Thomas back to the house he had schemed so hard to steal. It started to rain. Heavy, fat drops whipped against the car windows with a sharp, stinging sound. Martha lay with her head in my lap, having cried herself into exhaustion. In her medicated sleep, she still murmured her son's name. I looked out into the driving rain, feeling as if the heavens were weeping for a misguided life, or perhaps simply washing away the filth of this earth. Thomas's funeral took place on a torrential, dreary day. The sky was a heavy, oppressive gray, looking as if it might collapse onto the roof of the funeral home. The mournful, sorrowful organ music blended with the sound of the pouring rain, creating a chilling, bleak atmosphere. A fair amount of neighbors and former colleagues showed up to pay their respects. Everyone clicked their tongues in pity for the young man who died too soon, and the white-haired mother burying her black-haired son. I wore a modest black dress, standing quietly by the casket, returning the bows of the guests. My face was gaunt, my eyes dark from lack of sleep, but absolutely no one could see the deep satisfaction hidden in my gaze. As the casket was being prepared for burial at the cemetery, a heavy, somber mood draped over the crowd. Martha was passing out repeatedly, requiring 2 people to hold her up. Suddenly, a yellow taxi pulled up to the cemetery gates. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She wore a tight black maternity dress, clearly displaying a swollen, pregnant belly. She carried a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, wailing theatrically as she walked toward the grave. "Thomas, why did you leave me and our baby so soon? My poor baby, your daddy is gone." All eyes instantly darted toward the strange woman. Shocked whispers erupted through the crowd. I recognized her immediately. It was Olivia, the sweet little mistress of my husband, the accomplice who sat on my bed and plotted my murder. Olivia rushed toward the grave, acting as if she were going to throw herself onto the casket, but several men held her back. She thrashed, tears and snot smearing her makeup, turning to look at Martha before dropping to her knees. "Mom, it's me, Olivia. I am carrying Thomas's child, the sole male heir to the Vance family. Mom, he's gone. Please don't abandon us." Martha, who had been staring blankly like a zombie, suddenly snapped back to life upon hearing the words times male heir asterisk. It was as if she were a drowning woman grabbing a lifeline. She surged forward, pushing past the people holding her, and threw her arms around Olivia. She aggressively patted and rubbed the woman's pregnant belly like she was touching solid gold. "Oh my God, is it true? My grandson, the Vance family heir, is here. Thomas, my son, your spirit is watching over us. You left us an heir." The sight of the mother-in-law and the mistress holding each other, wailing in joy and tragedy right in the middle of a funeral, left everyone stunned. They looked at me with pitying, sympathetic eyes, the official, legal wife standing completely isolated. I maintained a perfectly calm, icy expression, observing this absurd, grotesque comedy. After verifying she had a grandson, Martha snapped her head toward me. Her eyes turned sharp as daggers, her attitude flipping faster than a coin. She pointed her finger right in my face, her shrill voice cutting through the rainy cemetery. "Look at that. Claire. She doesn't even have a title, and she gave Thomas a son to carry on the family name. You were his wife for 3 years, and you were completely barren. You couldn't give him a single child, and now you just stand there like a useless log. You are a useless woman, a curse that wiped out the luck of this family." Martha's insults were meant to cut into my pride, but I felt absolutely no pain. I only found it hilarious. It turned out, the bond between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law was nothing but smoke in the face of a grandchild that might not even be real. She was willing to trample on the dignity of her legal daughter-in-law to protect her son's mistress, solely driven by her archaic obsession with a male heir and her boundless greed. I stood up straight, looking directly into Martha's and Olivia's eyes. My voice rang out loud and clear enough for everyone around to hear. "Mom, today is your son's funeral. Keep some dignity for him. As for children, who is a real grandchild and who is a fake, that will be determined later. The law exists for a reason. No one can just claim a fortune off a lie." Hearing my firm tone, Olivia looked slightly panicked. She instinctively shrank back against Martha for protection. Martha, emboldened, hugged Olivia tighter and declared loudly, "I don't care about the law. I know my own family's blood. From now on, Olivia is coming to live with me. I will take care of her so she can give birth to my grandson. And you better watch your step, Claire. Don't you dare lay a finger on them." I smiled a thin, cold smile and gave a slight nod. "Of course, Mom. You take very good care of her. I am also very much looking forward to the day your grandson is born." A cold gust of wind blew past, sweeping up dry leaves with a harsh rustle. It signaled that a brutal war over assets was about to begin before the dirt on the grave had even settled. 3 days after the funeral, the house still smelled of cold incense, but an emergency family meeting was called in the living room. Martha sat pompously in the center armchair. Beside her sat Olivia, rubbing her pregnant belly with a smug, triumphant look, acting like a newly crowned queen. I sat across from them. I poured a cup of hot green tea, taking a slow sip. I felt the bitter taste on my tongue, which then faded into a sweet aftertaste, much like my life right now. Martha slammed her hand on the coffee table with a loud Times thwack asterisk, kicking off the conversation with a bossy, arrogant tone. "I called you down here today to discuss Thomas's assets. Olivia here is carrying a son, the only male heir of our lineage. By rights, all the assets Thomas left behind belong to his son." Olivia eagerly pulled a 4D ultrasound printout and a prenatal DNA test from her designer bag, undoubtedly forged, or done using a hair or toothbrush she secretly stole from Thomas. She placed them on the table and pushed them toward me. She spoke, her voice sugary sweet, but hiding venomous claws. "Take a look, Claire. Here is the irrefutable proof. You can't deny this. I'm not greedy, but I have to demand what's rightfully my child's. Thomas is gone. We are left with nothing. Do you really have the heart to fight over money with an unborn child?" Martha chimed in immediately. "Exactly. You are his wife, but you have no children. You're practically a stranger now. Take a little cash, pack your bags, and move out. Leave this house for me and Olivia, so I can take care of my grandson." I picked up the ultrasound photo, a sneer forming on my lips. The baby in the photo was real, but whether it was Thomas's was highly debatable. However, I wasn't in a rush to expose her just yet. I placed the paper back down, looked straight into the eyes of these two greedy women, and spoke calmly. "Mom and Olivia, what you say makes sense. The grandson of the family obviously deserves his inheritance. I'm not petty. I am fully prepared to divide the assets exactly according to the law." I paused, observing their faces light up with joy, then continued. "But before we divide the assets, we have to settle Thomas's debts." Martha and Olivia's faces instantly changed colors. The smiles vanished from their lips. Martha stammered, "Debts? What debts? Thomas was a manager. He made great money. He didn't have any debt." I stood up, walked to the digital safe, which I had changed the passcode to immediately after Thomas died, and pulled out a thick, heavy folder. I tossed it onto the glass table with a heavy Times thud asterisk. Those were the high-interest loan agreements, collateral documents, and threatening collection notices from aggressive loan sharks that Thomas had hidden all this time to fund his crypto gambling and sugar daddy lifestyle with Olivia. I flipped through the pages for them to see, my voice like striking steel. "Look closely. Mom, Thomas took out high-interest, daily compound loans from mobsters to gamble on Bitcoin, and he lost absolutely everything. The total principal and interest as of today is nearly $250,000. According to probate law, whoever inherits an estate must also assume the debts attached to it. If Olivia wants to claim the assets for her son, please sign right here. Let's share the burden of this $250,000 debt." Olivia picked up the loan documents, her hands shaking violently, her face drained of all color. She was a gold digger. She clung to Thomas because she thought he was wealthy. Now, finding out he was a massive debtor, she was terrified out of her mind. $250,000 was a catastrophic number. Even if they sold this entire house, it might not cover it, let alone have anything left to split. She looked at Martha, desperate for help, but Martha was currently sitting with her mouth hanging open, paralyzed in her chair. She couldn't believe her golden boy, her perfect son, was a degenerate gambler and a massive debtor. I delivered another psychological blow. So, Olivia, did you truly love Thomas? Do you love your child? If you do, sign right here. We will sell this house together, pay off his debts so his soul can rest in peace. Otherwise, those loan sharks are going to show up here. They threaten to break legs and cut off fingers. It would be terrible if something happened to the baby in your belly from all that stress. Olivia immediately yanked her hand back from the paper, as if it burned her. She stammered, fiercely denying it. No, I don't know anything. I was just a friend. This baby probably isn't even Thomas's. I need to leave. She frantically grabbed her purse, stood up and tried to bolt. Martha, seeing this, panicked and grabbed Olivia's arm. Wait, what are you doing? You just said he was my grandson. Olivia violently shoved Martha's hand away, her true, trashy colors finally showing. Let go of me. I have to raise this kid. What does it have to do with your family? Your family is a bunch of scammers, drowning in debt, acting like you're rich. I'm not stupid enough to step into this trap. With that, she bolted for the door, not daring to look back. I watched her silhouette, letting out a dry laugh. Martha slumped back into her chair, clutching her chest, gasping for air. This shock was too immense for her to handle. She had just lost her son, and now she discovered her son was a degenerate debtor, and her precious grandson had vanished into thin air. Her fantasy world of wealth and status was shattering into dust right before her eyes. Olivia hurriedly grabbed her purse, her face completely pale, trying to rush out the door to escape the massive mountain of debt I had just painted for her. But I wasn't going to let her slip away that easily, especially since the best part of the show hadn't even started. I stepped quickly, blocking the doorway. My eyes, looking at her, were no longer the enduring, submissive eyes of the past. They were razor-sharp, dissecting the woman standing before me. I spoke calmly, but with absolute authority. Where are you rushing off to, Olivia? I understand you're scared of taking on debt, but what about my mother-in-law's precious grandson? Where exactly do you plan on taking the Vance family bloodline? Seeing me block Olivia's path, Martha acted like a drowning woman grabbing a lifeline. She lunged forward, gripping Olivia's sleeve tightly, her voice trembling and pleading pathetically. Yes, exactly. You can go wherever you want, but you have to leave the baby with me. Or you can stay here and give birth. I will provide for you both. Claire can handle the debt. My grandson is precious. I will not let him be raised on the streets. Olivia struggled violently, trying to yank her arm away from the old woman's grasp. She snapped, her shrill voice exposing her ghetto nature. Let me go. I already told you I have nothing to do with you people. Your family is dirt poor, drowning in debt. And you want to trap me here? I'm not an idiot. I stood with my arms crossed, watching the tug-of-war between the two greedy women. Then, I slowly pulled a small manila envelope from my blazer pocket. I held it up in front of them, smiling thinly. You don't need to put on a show anymore, Olivia. I have a gift for you. You can look at this before deciding whether you want to stay or go. Olivia froze, eyeing the envelope in my hand with intense suspicion. I slowly opened it, pulled out a stack of photos and a medical document, and tossed them lightly onto the glass coffee table. The photos showed Olivia acting very intimately, walking into a motel with a strange man, and more importantly, the medical document was a brand new gynecological exam from a highly reputable private clinic. I pointed at the results page, enunciating every single word. Take a good look. This is your exam result from 2 weeks ago, obtained by a private investigator I hired. It clearly states, asterisk, thin uterine lining, no gestational sac present. Asterisk so. What exactly is that bulging belly you're carrying around? Is it a pillow? A silicone prop? Or a malignant tumor of pure lies? Hearing this, Martha was struck dumb. Her arms fell limply to her sides. Her eyes widened, staring blankly at the medical report, as if she were looking at a ghost. She stammered, unable to believe her own ears. What? Not pregnant? Then, where is my grandson? Olivia turned ashen. Sweat poured down her face. She stepped back, instinctively putting her hands over her fake belly. The naked truth was laid bare under the harsh light of the living room. I took a step toward her, forcefully grabbing the loose maternity dress she was wearing and yanking it upward. A small, cleverly strapped-on foam pillow was exposed. It detached and dropped with a pathetic thud times onto the hardwood floor. The living room fell into a deathly silence. Martha looked at the pillow lying lifelessly on the floor, then up at Olivia's shameless face. Her entire worldview shattered. The final hope, the life raft named grandson, that she had clung to in order to justify all her sins, was nothing but a spectacular, humiliating scam. Martha stood paralyzed. Her mouth hung open. Her hands shook violently in the air, as if trying to claw at something invisible that was fading away. Seeing that her scam was completely exposed and she had no way to deny it, Olivia's demeanor flipped. She went from terrified to aggressively defensive. She tilted her chin up, her voice shrill. "Yeah, so what if I'm not pregnant? Who told your idiot son to be so blind? He saw a pretty girl and lost his mind. He believed everything I said. He gave me that money voluntarily. I didn't hold a knife to his throat. Don't you dare try to ask for it back." Hearing those venomous words, Martha completely snapped. She lunged forward, trying to grab Olivia's hair. "You filthy bitch! You scammed me! You scammed my son! Give me back my money! Give me back my grandson!" But the weak, elderly woman was no match for a young, agile girl. Olivia just shoved her slightly, and Martha went tumbling backward, crashing hard into the sofa. I stood, watching the chaotic scene. I didn't feel a single ounce of pity. I only felt that this was the absolute peak of tragicomedy. I pulled out my phone, dialed 911, and held the screen up, my voice ice cold. "Olivia, you have two choices. 1. You return the entire $50,000 Thomas transferred to you over the last 3 months. I have all the bank statements right here. 2. I hit send and report you to the police for felony fraud and extortion." Hearing the word police and felony, Olivia immediately turned green. She might have a big mouth, but she was just a petty gold digger. Tangling with the law terrified her. She stammered, her eyes darting around, searching for an exit. You can't threaten me. I already spent that money. I don't have it. Besides, those were gifts. Sugar daddy money. You can't ask for that back legally." I smiled a dry smile and took another step forward. "Gifts? With an amount that large, combined with the fact that you used a fake pregnancy to extort it, that easily constitutes felony fraud under state law. Do you want to go to federal prison, or do you want to get the hell out of my house right now and disappear from our lives forever?" Olivia quickly calculated her odds. She knew she couldn't drag this out. She grabbed her purse, shot a vicious glare at Martha, and sprinted for the door, not forgetting to shout a vulgar string of expletives on her way out. The door slammed shut, returning a suffocating silence to the living room. Martha sat crumpled on the floor, her hair a mess, tears streaming down her deeply wrinkled face. She had just lost her son, lost her imaginary grandson, and had been ruthlessly scammed out of money and emotion. She looked up at me, her eyes glazed over, muttering, "Claire, is it really over? Where is my grandson? Where is Thomas? Why did our family end up like this?" I sat down in the armchair across from her. I looked at her with a mix of pity and pure contempt. I spoke slowly, every word rubbing salt into her wounds. "Do you see now, Mom? You insulted me for not having kids. You encouraged Thomas to cheat to get a male heir. And in the end, the grandson is a throw pillow. Your son died because you were too cheap to pay an electric bill, and your money was stolen by a con artist. This is the price you pay for your boundless greed and cruelty, Mom." Hearing that, Martha clutched her chest. Her eyes rolled back into her head, her body convulsed, and she passed out cold on the floor. This rapid succession of devastating shocks had finally crushed whatever sanity the calculating, manipulative woman had left. I called an ambulance to take Martha to the hospital, but this time, there was no fake anxiety, just the cold detachment of someone finishing a final obligation. The doctors diagnosed her with a mild stroke induced by severe psychological trauma. While it wasn't fatal, The neurological damage was permanent. When she woke up, her eyes no longer held that sharp, cunning glint. They were dull and vacant. She stared at the stark white hospital ceiling, giggling foolishly. Drool leaked from the corner of her mouth. Occasionally, she would clap her hands together like a toddler. I took her back home to care for her, or rather, to let her live out her final, hellish days inside the very house where she had inflicted so much suffering. The spacious, 3-story house was now as chilling as a massive tomb. Martha drifted between lucidity and madness. During the day, she would sit huddled in the corner, muttering and counting her fingers, babbling about gold, money, and real estate. At night, when the wind howled through the window cracks, she would fall into states of pure panic. She would run frantically through the house, digging through the unplugged refrigerator, screaming her son's name in agony. "Thomas! Thomas, come eat some watermelon. I plugged it in. The fridge is cold, it won't go bad, I promise." There were nights I lay in my locked bedroom, listening to her scratching at the heavy wooden door, her mournful cries giving me goosebumps. She would scream, "Don't unplug it! Don't unplug it! My son is dead. Give me back my son. Give me back my pillow. My grandson is a pillow." Her screams echoed in the dead of night, more haunting and terrifying than any horror movie. The neighbors started whispering. They said Martha's house was haunted, or that she was experiencing instant karma for being such a wicked woman. No one dared to visit. The house became completely isolated in the middle of a busy suburban street. I stood on the second-floor balcony, looking down at the patio where Martha was sitting, picking up dry leaves and lining them up in rows, a vacant, insane smile on her face. I didn't feel the immense satisfaction I thought I would. I only felt a profound, overwhelming sadness. The revenge was complete. The enemies were utterly ruined, living a fate worse than death. But the wounds in my heart couldn't magically heal. My parents couldn't be brought back to life, and my youth had been buried in this tragedy. I realized that when you throw mud at someone, your own hands get dirty. But I didn't regret it. Because if I hadn't been ruthless, the person lying 6 feet under the dirt right now would be me. Martha now lived entirely in her own world, a chaotic world trapped between the past and reality, where she was imprisoned by her own sins. She was terrified of light, terrified of the sound of a running refrigerator, and absolutely terrified of red watermelons. Every time she saw a watermelon, she would shriek in horror and curl into a ball, as if she were looking at blood. The punishment of a guilty conscience is sometimes 1,000 times more brutal than the punishment of the law. I looked at her and thought, "Asterisk, Mom, just keep living like this. Live to remember, and live to pay off the debt for everything you've done." Asterisk. After handling Thomas's funeral and once Martha's condition stabilized, in her new state of madness, I initiated the next step of my plan, liquidating the assets to pay off the debt. The $250,000 debt I fabricated for Olivia and Martha was actually just a phantom number, based on Thomas's massive losses in crypto. But the loan shark documents I forged, or gathered from his old shady contacts, looked incredibly real. I used these papers to legally justify selling the house that held far too many traumatic, filthy memories. I didn't want to keep anything related to them. I wanted to wipe the slate clean to start over. I contacted a real estate agent and listed the house for slightly below market value for a quick cash sale. Martha, still in her delirium, saw strangers walking through the house, examining the furniture, and shrank back into the corner in fear. I sat down next to her, stroking her hair, my voice soft but deeply manipulative. "Mom, Thomas owes some very bad people a lot of money. The mob is coming to collect soon. If we don't sell the house to pay them back, they are going to take you away. They're going to chop off your arms and legs. It's very scary, Mom." Hearing about the mob and having her limbs chopped off, Martha shook violently, her eyes wide with terror. In her chaotic subconscious, the fear of losing money and physical pain remained entirely intact. She nodded frantically, drool spilling from her lips, stammering, sell it. Don't let them take me, I'm scared. Pay the debt." I pulled out the power of attorney to sell the house, which I had prepared when she was slightly more lucid, and tricked her into signing it right after Thomas's death, when she was hysterical. Right in front of her, I took her hand, pressed her thumb onto an ink pad, and stamped it on the paper, finalizing the last legal hurdle. One messy signature, one bright red thumbprint. It was done. The absolute right to dispose of this house belonged entirely to me. The sale of the house happened fast. The buyers were a young couple. They knew nothing of the tragedies that had unfolded behind these doors. They only saw a great deal in a good neighborhood. I watched them happily measuring walls, planning where to put their sofa and TV. Their eyes sparkled with the joy of newlyweds buying their first home. That innocence and overflowing hope. It looked exactly like me 3 years ago. I smiled bitterly, silently praying that they would never have to experience the horrors I endured under this roof. I walked upstairs to the master bedroom, the space that used to be our private sanctuary, and the birthplace of their dark conspiracies. I opened the closet and pulled out Thomas's crisp suits, the expensive ties I had painstakingly chosen for him for his birthdays. The familiar scent of his cologne still lingered on the fabric, the scent that once made my heart skip a beat. Now, it only elicited disgust and nausea. I didn't keep a single item. I ruthlessly threw everything into heavy-duty black trash bags piled in the middle of the floor. The movers looked at me with sympathetic eyes. They probably thought I was a grieving widow, trying to erase the painful memories of my late husband. They had no idea I was taking out the garbage from my life. In the corner of the room, Martha sat huddled on a cheap wooden chair, the only piece of furniture not yet taken away. Her dull eyes watched the trash bags being dragged across the floor. She no longer screamed or cursed, she just muttered nonsense, occasionally reaching her hand out to grasp at something invisible, fading away. I walked over, placed a hand on her shoulder, my voice gentle but distant. "Mom, the car is here. Let's go. The house is sold. The new owners need to move in." Martha looked up at me, a flash of fear in her eyes before returning to a vacant stare. She clutched the old throw pillow tightly to her chest. She mumbled, "Where? Back to the country? Thomas said he was going to build me a mansion." Her words were like a needle to my heart, a stark reminder of the empty, delusional promises Thomas used to manipulate his greedy mother. He promised her a mansion, a life of royalty, and in the end, left her with nothing but isolation and madness. I sighed and helped her up. "Yes, we're going to a new place. There are lots of older friends there. People to take care of you. You won't have to worry about cooking or saving electricity anymore." She obediently followed me, her posture stooped, swaying like a flickering candle in the wind. She stepped over the threshold, never once looking back at the house she had valued more than her daughter-in-law's life. Perhaps, in her subconscious, she also wanted to flee this place filled with the ghosts of her sins. I handed the keys over to the new owners, received the final wire transfer, and signed the closing documents. Holding the receipt, I felt incredibly light, as if a massive boulder crushing my chest had finally been lifted. The iron gate clanged shut behind me, officially severing all ties between me and the Vance family. I looked up at the sky. Today, it was a brilliant, vibrant blue. Fluffy white clouds drifted lazily, signaling a new beginning. It was late, but not too late. While packing the last few miscellaneous items in Thomas's home office before leaving for good, I accidentally knocked a thick book off a shelf. It was an old English dictionary Thomas never bothered to read, but he always kept it in the most prominent spot on his bookshelf. When the book hit the floor, the cover popped open, revealing that the pages inside had been expertly hollowed out. Inside the cavity lay a small black leather notebook and a cold, metal USB drive. My heart skipped a beat. My intuition told me this was the key that would unlock the financial secrets Thomas had hidden for so long. I grabbed the notebook with trembling hands and flipped through the yellowed pages. They were covered in Thomas's messy handwriting, recording accounts and passwords for dark websites, illegal gambling forums, and most importantly, long, meaningless strings of characters that I immediately recognized as recovery seed phrases for crypto wallets. I remembered all the times Thomas complained about being broke, the times he asked me for money to pay the water bill, or even for gas money, all while he was secretly accumulating a massive fortune in this digital world. He had been preparing for a new, luxurious life with Olivia, built on my blood, sweat, tears, and my impending corpse. I opened my laptop, plugged in the USB, which turned out to be a Ledger hardware wallet, and accessed the crypto accounts following the instructions in the notebook. The loading screen spun for a few seconds before displaying a number that made me dizzy. I almost dropped the glass of water in my hand. The balance across the wallets was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Converted, it was an absolute fortune. More than enough for a person to live comfortably for the rest of their life without lifting a finger. It turned out the $250,000 debt I fabricated to scare Olivia and Martha wasn't entirely made up. He did gamble, and he did lose money. But the assets he had hidden away were vastly larger than his debts. He was a cunning, greedy fox down to the marrow of his bones. I looked at the numbers dancing on the screen and laughed until tears streamed down my face. Asterisk. Oh, Thomas. You calculated every single penny with your wife. You let your old mother unplug the fridge to save a few dollars, only to die a miserable, agonizing death without ever getting to spend a single dime of this dirty money. Asterisk. Asterisk. You plan to use this money to build a love nest with your mistress, but now, it belongs to me, the wife you viewed as a thorn in your side. Is this the cruel irony of fate, or a belated apology gift you were forced to offer me? Asterisk. I quickly executed the transfers, moving all the cryptocurrency into a secure, cold storage wallet I had just created, changing all the passwords and access keys. Holding this massive fortune didn't give me the euphoric high of winning the lottery. It only brought a cold, hollow sense of security. This was the price paid for my youth, for my love, and for the emotional wounds that would never fully heal. I shut the laptop and securely tucked the cold wallet into my purse. I considered this the damage compensation the Vance family owed me. I looked at a framed photo of Thomas lying discarded in a cardboard box waiting to be burned and whispered, "Thank you. I will use this money to live well. To live for the years you tried to steal from me. Rest in peace. I will spend your money exactly how it deserves to be spent." I hailed a taxi and went straight to the city cemetery, where my parents rested. The rain had stopped. Weak rays of sunlight began piercing through the gray clouds, illuminating the stark white headstones resting silently on the pine-covered hill. I walked slowly down the damp, paved path, holding a vibrant bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums and a bottle of expensive whiskey. The wind whistled through the pine needles, creating a soft, rustling sound like the whispers of departed souls. My heart was unusually calm. There was no longer the agonizing, tearing pain of my previous visits, but rather the profound peace of someone who had completed their mission. I stopped in front of two adjacent graves. The green grass had fully covered the earth around the headstones. The photos of my parents on the granite smiled back at me gently. Those smiles had haunted me for 3 years, urging me to survive and seek justice. I laid the flowers down, poured the whiskey into 3 small cups, and lit a bundle of incense. The fragrant smoke rose, wrapping around me like the warm hugs of my parents from long ago. I knelt on the cold stone, reached out to touch my mother's photo, and whispered, "Dad, Mom, your unfilial daughter finally dared to come see you today. The man who caused the accident, the man who ripped you away from me, he has paid for his crimes." I pulled Thomas's death certificate from my purse, along with a copy of the fake debt documents I used to deceive Martha and Olivia. I lit them on fire, watching the orange flames consume the black ink, turning it into ash. I spoke, my voice choking with tears. I didn't use a knife. I didn't use a gun. I used their own greed and cruelty to punish them. I know you both, watching from above, wouldn't want my hands to be stained with blood, but I had no other choice. The law had no evidence. I had to become the judge myself. Now he is dead. His mother has lost her mind. His estate is gone. I think you can finally rest in peace now. The wind suddenly picked up, catching the ashes and scattering them into the air, disappearing into the void. I felt as if the 1,000-pound weight on my shoulders had finally been lifted. A light, freeing sensation spread through my entire body. I sat there for a long time, telling my parents about my upcoming plans, about how I was going to leave this city, about the little house by the ocean I always dreamed of. I promised them I would live a happy, resilient life, so as not to let down their hopes and their sacrifices. When I stood up to leave, The sun had broken through completely. The brilliant golden sunlight stretched across the graves, illuminating the quiet, solemn cemetery. I looked back at my parents one last time, smiling in relief. Asterisk, don't worry about me. I will be okay. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad. I have to go now. Asterisk, I walked away. My posture straight, my shadow stretching long on the dirt path. After completing everything at the cemetery, I returned to the nursing home to settle my final obligations regarding Martha. This was a basic, Medicaid-funded, state-run nursing facility in the outer suburbs. The facilities weren't luxurious, but it was clean and had 24/7 care. I met with the administrator and paid a lump sum up front, enough to cover Martha's stay for the next 3 years. The amount was negligible compared to the fortune I had seized, but it was enough to ensure she had food, clothes, and medication. I considered it the final act of mercy I could offer the woman who had tried to send me to an early grave. I walked past the small courtyard and saw Martha sitting on a concrete bench. She was still clutching that old, worn-out throw pillow. She was muttering a lullaby, her eyes staring blankly into the distance, completely unable to recognize me. A fleeting feeling of pity crossed my mind, but it was quickly extinguished by logic. I didn't approach her to say goodbye. I knew my presence would mean nothing to her now, and might even trigger another manic episode. I stood from afar, looking at her one last time. Looking at a stranger, a witness to a past I needed to forget. She would live the rest of her life in her own delusional world, paying for her sins with absolute isolation and being entirely forgotten. Leaving the nursing home, I pulled out my phone to perform the final act of severance. I opened my contacts, found Martha's number, and the numbers of all the in-laws who had chimed in to mock and ridicule me for being barren. My fingers slid across the screen decisively, hitting block on every single one. Every tap was another invisible chain being snapped. Next, I called my cellular provider and requested they permanently deactivate the SIM card I was using. This number held too many painful text messages, too many deceitful phone calls. I didn't want to keep it for another second. I pulled the SIM card out, snapped it in half, and tossed it into a roadside trash can. The sharp times, crack times of the plastic breaking sounded incredibly satisfying. I got into the waiting Uber and told the driver to head straight to O'Hare Airport. The car rolled away, leaving behind the noisy, polluted city, leaving behind the people and the memories that had hurt me. I looked out the window, watching the skyscrapers fade into the distance. My heart felt as light as a bird released from a cage. In my purse right now, there was only my ID, the cold wallet holding the cryptocurrency, and a bank account in my name, Claire. No longer the daughter-in-law of the Vance family, no longer a widow. I was returning to being myself, free and independent. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath of the cool AC air in the car, and told myself, asterisk goodbye, past. Goodbye, pain. Asterisk. Years later, through a nurse at the facility whose number I had saved to handle Martha's medications, I learned how Martha spent her final days. The nurse told me, her voice full of pity, that Martha was the most tragic and special case they had. She had no visitors. No children or grandchildren ever came to see her. She only had the prepaid funds to sustain a bed and meager, bland meals day after day. Her room was at the very end of the hall, where the light was dimmest, yet it was fitting for a soul that had been swallowed by darkness. Martha lived in a chaotic world between reality and illusion, where her golden past and brutal present intertwined. She often sat for hours by the window, petting that ragged pillow, singing old lullabies. In her delirium, she still thought she was living in the grand, 3-story suburban house. She thought she was still the powerful, tyrannical mother-in-law, forcing her daughter-in-law to obey her every command. But when the wind howled through the window cracks, or thunder ripped across the sky, she would shrink back, crawling under her bed, shaking violently like a wounded animal hiding from predators. Her greatest trauma, however, was watermelon. The nurse said that one time, the cafeteria served watermelon for dessert. The moment she saw the bright red flesh, Martha screamed bloody murder. She flipped her food tray and scrambled into a corner, scratching at the walls until her fingers bled. She shrieked that it was her son's blood, that the watermelon was poisoned, and anyone who ate it would have their insides ripped out. From then on, no one dared to bring anything red near her. She lived in perpetual terror, tormented by the memories of her own cheapness and ignorance. The image of unplugging the refrigerator every night had likely become the nightmare that haunted her until she closed her eyes forever. The other elderly residents initially tried to talk to her, but seeing her constantly slip between lucidity and madness, spewing cursed words about death and karma, they eventually avoided her. Martha became entirely isolated in a crowd, wandering alone with her own shadow. On quiet, dead nights, people could hear her crying. It wasn't the sharp, screechy wail of her past, but a mournful, haunting cry that sounded like an echo from hell. She called out for Thomas. She called out for her phantom grandson. And sometimes, in rare, fleeting moments of clarity, she called my name. She called out, "Claire, Mom was wrong. Let Mom come home." But no one answered her. There were only 4 cold walls and the wind whistling through the window pane. The remaining funds in her account dwindled over the years. I heard that in her final days, she became skeletal, nothing but skin and bones. Her deeply sunken eyes constantly stared blankly at the ceiling. She passed away on a stormy, torrential night. She died in absolute isolation, without a single relative by her side to close her eyes. Her death was the final period to a family tragedy, a harsh, brutal warning about the consequences of greed and cruelty. I heard the news of her passing over the phone. My heart didn't ripple. I just sighed softly, praying that her soul would find release, finally shedding the resentments and sins of human existence. I chose a coastal city in California, full of sunshine and ocean breezes, to start my life over, a place thousands of miles away from the cramped, noisy streets of my past. The ocean here was a vibrant, endless blue, stretching to the horizon, carrying the salty scent I had always craved, the scent of freedom. Using my savings and the inheritance from Thomas's crypto wallet, I bought an old, small house tucked away in an alley just steps from the beach. The house had blooming bougainvillea over the front gate and a spacious courtyard. It was exactly the dream of a peaceful sanctuary I had harbored since I was a young girl. I rolled up my sleeves and renovated the house into a charming little bed and breakfast. I painted every wall, planted every flower bush, and picked out every curtain myself. The manual labor was exhausting, keeping me busy from dawn till dusk, but strangely, I didn't feel tired at all. On the contrary, every drop of sweat that fell seemed to wash away the sorrows and traumatic memories taking root in my heart. I found joy in watching the house slowly transform, becoming cozy and brimming with life, a stark contrast to the cold, suffocating 3-story house of my past. Guests who came to my B&B were of all ages, from all over the country. There were young couples in love, families on vacation, and solo travelers carrying their own private sorrows, just like I once did. I listened to their stories, sharing hot tea and simple, home-cooked meals. Through their stories, I saw reflections of myself and the multicolored mosaic of life. I realized I wasn't alone, because humanity and kindness are always present everywhere, as long as we open our hearts to receive it. One late autumn afternoon, as the cool ocean breeze began to sweep through the coastal town, my B&B welcomed a special guest. He was a man around my age, tall, with a strong, chiseled face, but eyes that radiated warmth and kindness. He booked the room online under the simple name, Miles. When he walked through the gate, his dusty backpack slung over one shoulder and a gentle smile on his face, I felt an incredibly strange sense of familiarity, as if we had met somewhere in the past. Even though my memory of him was completely blank, Miles stayed at my B&B for a week. He wasn't like a typical tourist. He rarely visited the famous, crowded spots. Instead, he spent his days wandering the beach, taking photos of fishing boats or children playing in the sand. In the evenings, he would sit in the living room, helping me fix a broken light bulb or hammering a loose nail back into a bookshelf. His presence was so light and natural that I forgot he was a guest. It felt like an old friend I hadn't seen in years. On his final night before leaving, Miles invited me for a glass of wine out on the breezy patio. Under the silver moonlight, he told me about his life, his travels, his failures, and how he got back up. He told me he had also gone through a broken marriage, had been betrayed, and lost faith in love. His story, though different in its details, mirrored mine in its pain and loneliness. We sat there, sharing our healed emotional scars, finding moments of deep empathy that required very few words. Suddenly, Miles looked deep into my eyes, his voice warm and steady. "Claire, to be honest, I've known you for a long time. 3 years ago, I was the site engineer for a construction project near your old house in Chicago. I used to see you sweeping the driveway, or crying by yourself when you walked back from the grocery store. I wanted to come over and ask if you were okay, but I hesitated. Then, some time passed, and I heard what happened to your family. I never expected to run into you here, looking so strong and peaceful." I froze, looking at the man in front of me. It turns out destiny is a magical, inexplicable thing. During the darkest days of my life, there was still a pair of eyes watching over me, a silent concern I knew absolutely nothing about. Miles didn't make any grand promises. He just left me his phone number and a final message before getting into his car. "If you ever need a friend to talk to, or just a companion for a road trip, call me. The door to my heart is always open, and I believe you deserve to be happy." The car rolled away, taking the man with the name that meant light far away, but leaving a seed of hope planted in my heart. I wasn't in a rush, nor was I harboring grand illusions, but I knew my heart was beginning to warm up again. Life still held so many beautiful things waiting ahead, as long as we dare to believe and dare to keep moving forward. The sunset fell over the ocean, painting the sky a mystical, deep purple. I walked barefoot along the sand, letting the small waves gently lick at my cold feet. I stopped at a rocky outcrop jutting into the sea, the spot I usually sat when I wanted absolute silence. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small object carefully wrapped in a handkerchief. It was my wedding ring, the final, remaining token of the hellish marriage with Thomas. For the past 3 years, I had kept it not out of lingering attachment, but because I wasn't truly ready to completely let go of the past. It served as a reminder of the pain, of the foolishness of my youth, and of the brutal price I had to pay to get to where I am today. But now, standing before the vast ocean, I realized that the greatest revenge isn't making your enemies suffer. It is living a genuinely happy life and forgetting they ever existed. Keeping this ring was like keeping a grain of sand in my eye. It only caused irritation and stinging pain. I looked at the ring one last time. Its gold band glinting in the fading light looked so utterly meaningless. I smiled the lightest, most peaceful smile I had ever worn and threw the ring as hard as I could. The tiny object traced a beautiful arc through the air